Welcome back to the Law News Network. I'm your host, Caroline Polisi, where we're giving you gavel-to-gavel coverage of the Frank Bybee trial. He is accused of 18 different felonies, including attempted murder of elderly woman, 79-year-old Marcia Souls. I'm joined today with our very own Ronn Blitzer, senior editor here at LawNewz and former prosecutor. Thanks for being on with us, Ronn.
Glad to be here.
Always love your insights. So I found that taped interview fascinating. We just heard from the lead detective on this case. She was on the witness stand, and then they were able to admit into evidence a previous interrogation that she did. What's so interesting about this case is these people are all sort of friends, right? Because Bybee was sort of on the team at the time. So it's kind of interesting to just from a psychological perspective, to see an interview done by people that were, former colleagues together. What did you take from that?
Yeah, it's very interesting because, the same people who are supposed to try and get evidence against him are people who know him and work with him. And it really, makes you think what was going through Bybee's head at the time and how much you may be able to, or may not be able to read into his body language here. Because, at first I was thinking, this does not look like a guy who is in a lot of trouble right now, or thinks he's in a lot of trouble.
This kind of slayed back,
laid
legs
back,
open.
Isn't really taking this whole thing all that seriously. At first, to me, he came off not too great, and he looked like someone who was trying to get away with something and was convinced he was going to get away with something. But then the more you watch and the more you think about, wait, he knows these people. If he is innocent and he's being questioned by friends and colleagues, that could explain his casual demeanor.
Yeah, absolutely. I kind of felt like as the tape went on and on, we saw the detective growing more and more frustrated with Bybee's kind of blanket answer, which is like, look, this woman is crazy. She has dementia. I think he called her a wacko, actually. And the detective really fired back at him saying, look, this is a holiday weekend. Nobody wants to be here. You know just as well as I do that this is protocol. I have to follow. This woman, you can say that she's crazy all you want, but she had clear physical indication that some type of altercation did in fact take place. And I think, I kind of got the sense that Bybee was a little uncomfortable. Just, I think that his perhaps relaxed demeanor was sort of almost a cover-up to try to make him look more at ease than he actually was. I don't know. It's again, it's hard to tell. There's no sort of playbook for how you should behave when you're guilty or innocent, obviously. But I don't know. I thought the checks. I'm really focused on the checks, and I want to hear your take on this, the evidence regarding the checks.
Yeah, the checks. The checks are a big deal.
Right.
They're tens of thousands of dollars that, he allegedly took from her checking account. And, he's saying, he had nothing to do with it. He didn't forge anything. He didn't steal from her. She sent him money. There was talk about her dog and how she offered to pay him an exorbitant amount of money to take care of her dog. And he was saying, oh, he didn't even want that much. So, he seemed to have an answer for a lot of these questions. It's just a question of how convincing are they.
And he really went to great lengths about the dog. And I think we have a photograph of Bybee with the dog sort of snuggling together in bed there. But he really, there it is. He really went
it's adorable.
Yeah, very, very adorable.
Yeah.
He went to great lengths to sort of say that, actually the work that he had put in taking care of this dog for however many weeks was actually far more than he was actually compensated for, and that she kept sort of doling out this effusive praise, saying he was such a great man, he was so wonderful, it was so great of him for taking care of her. And I think the detective even, was trying to sort of, kind of like a summation, but she was trying to sort of sum up Bybee's argument at the end, and she said, okay, so you're just a really nice guy, you just, out of the goodness of your own heart, you really just want to take care of people, and you encountered this elderly woman and you felt that you had to take care of her. And you could detect sort of a note of perhaps sarcasm in her voice there, as is in mine as well, because who just befriends an elderly woman out of the goodness of their heart. I mean, I don't, maybe I'm just, you know, not that nice, but it doesn't seem like something that would happen. I mean, is there a benign explanation for you in your mind of of conceivable scenarios? Could this potentially just be, this guy was a really nice guy, taking care of this elderly woman, his heart went out to her, and his hands are clean?
It's really hard for me to imagine. I mean, also just looking at that picture of him with the dog. Can we see that again, by the way?
It's just too good. It's too good.
He's not smiling. Who is taking a picture cuddled with a dog like that and doesn't even smile?
Right, it's a selfie too.
Yeah,
he's
that's a little disheartening.
Yeah.
That, if anything, is leaning towards me thinking that this guy's guilty too.
Right. Oh, there's the dog again.
Yeah. That's a cute dog, and he's, you know, taking a selfie with it and doesn't even seem to be happy about it. It's
So there's a depraved heart involved there.
Yeah, it seems like a pretty disturbing, like, postcard image, if you will. It's I'm not really.
I hear you on that one. But getting back to the forensic evidence in this case, you know, so apparently, from what we hear, the detectives sort of intercepted these checks, and so you'll hear the detective in that interview that we just heard really continually asking over and over again Frank Bybee whether or not A, he wrote the checks, B, did he send the checks to himself, C, did he cash any of these checks? So we know he never was able to cash any of these checks, which were for huge sums of money. But the fact is, his fingerprint was found on one of those checks or on one of the envelopes, and you'll see that the detective asked, is there any scenario under which one of your fingerprints could, or any DNA could be found on these checks? And do you remember what he answered? I loved it.
I don't remember his exact words there.
So it was a no, but. It was a no, but, you know, maybe, you know, because I was in her house, and so it was a very
it's a qualified denial.
It was a very qualified denial. So I thought that was very interesting. In terms of like what juries, as your insight as a former prosecutor, how like convincing do you think the jury is going to find sort of DNA evidence and the fact that his fingerprint was on these checks, or what do juries like in terms of forensic evidence?
Well, juries typically enjoy things that they're accustomed to seeing in TV and movies. So when you start hearing fingerprints, that often gets people's attention, for better or for worse. But especially if he's denying it, even if it is that qualified denial, and then there is fingerprint evidence, that's going to be pretty persuasive.
Yeah. What about, I was interested in sort of the detective's demeanor throughout the course of this interrogation, in terms of how much, look, we knew that she knew that there was going to be DNA evidence, but then she posed this question to Bybee. How much of this sort of cat and mouse game, just I'm always interested as a defense attorney from you guys, from you prosecutors, like what's your strategy when you get into the room with this guy? Like what is the prosecution and law enforcement, what are they talking about? How are they going to draw the confession, if you were, out of him?
First of all, don't let on how much you already know.
Okay.
You try to get the suspect or defendant to talk as much as possible, because the more they talk, the more they could contradict themselves, the more they could contradict statements that they may have made in the past, if any, or contradict information that you already have. So, you know, anytime that I had been in a situation where I was questioning a defendant, I would always, you know, if it's, you know, pre-trial, you know, a deposition or something, I would just try and get them to talk as much as I possibly could, and then once they're already talking and, you know, kind of comfortable, then you try to set them up a bit if you can.
Right. I noticed sort of a lot of repetitive questions, so asking the same question over and over again, expecting perhaps a different answer. Like right at the end there, they were really focused on whether or not he had an alibi for that Wednesday night going into the Thursday morning that this alleged attempted murder took place. How did you think he came off on that one?
Again, you know, it was tough for me to hear all of it just from where I was, but You know, I thought, you know, he didn't come off as bad as some other defendants
right.
I've seen in these situations, but, you know, you can always nitpick and, you know, kind of second guess, you know, different
I always
approaches.
tend to give defendants a little leeway because it is hard to sort of recall where you were on a Thursday night or a Wednesday night of whatever week. But nonetheless, he could not really give an ironclad alibi, obviously. So I think they were trying to poke holes in that story there. Let's talk about the Baker Act. We heard earlier this morning, I was taking our viewers through some of the testimony of the detectives in this case that had, and they kept referring to Baker acting, using it like as a verb, this woman. What is that? Can you explain to our viewers a little bit about Baker Act?
Yeah, I mean, that has to do with, you know, someone's, you know, mental capacity and psychological state.
Right.
Yeah.
And as I understand it, it would be sort of committing them against their will for a psychological evaluation of sorts.
Yes. So under the Baker Act, if a person is found to be in a particular state, then they can be committed.
Right. So what do you think? I mean, to me, it's pretty bad evidence for the prosecution that she had been Baker Act. Let me use the lingo. She had been Baker Act sort of prior to this all happening, or she at least had some mental health issues going on there. What do you think?
Yeah, that's very damaging to the prosecution because, you know, you have these horrible allegations against Bybee, and you have him, you know, trying to paint her as, you know, this person who's not all there, who, you know, one minute will treat him like an angel and the next like a devil, and, you know, saying how, you know, she was doing things that weren't really normal, and then you find out that she has this history. So when he's trying to give this defense and there's some sort of evidence to back that up, even if you find the evidence against him to be persuasive, this sort of creates some reasonable doubt.
Absolutely. And I'm trying to recall the name of the witness that we heard from this morning on the stand. She was a caregiver to Miss Souls, but she testified sort of to the fact that she was kind of foul-mouthed, that she was could sort of fly off the handle at any moment, and that she believed that she was suffering from dementia. This woman had worked as a caregiver for the elderly her entire life, and said that, you know, she had seen this before. Of course, the prosecution was very quick to note that this woman is not an expert. You know, she is not qualified to give sort of an expert opinion to the jury on the question of whether or not the alleged victim suffered from dementia. Nonetheless, I think we did see a pretty credible witness get on the stand this morning and testify to the fact that this woman was perhaps a little bit explosive, shall we say, perhaps a little bit disgruntled at times, could get outraged very easily. How do you think that played for the defense's case?
It could go either way, because on the one hand, it's evidence that, you know, maybe she wasn't all there mentally, and, you know, who knows what she might be capable of. You know, if she has been aggressive in the past and she had been Baker acted, if you will, then maybe she could have set this whole thing up. At the same time, if she was aggressive in her demeanor from time to time, maybe there were moments where she and Bybee weren't getting along very well, and that could have been a motive for him.
Oh, very good analysis, Ron. Thank you so much for your insight. I think we're going to go